blessings of God be upon His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before we begin today's event, we will begin with some holy book of Quran with Brother Asad.
This is from the 4th chapter, verse 135. So Surah Al-Ma'idah. I'm sorry, Surah Al-Nisa. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين بالقسط شهداء لله ولو على أنفسكم أو الوالدين والأقربين إن يكن غنيا أو فقيرا فالله أولى بهما فلا تتبعوا الهدى أن تعدلوا وإن تلوا أو تعرضوا فإن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا صدق الله العظيم. In the name of the one God, the most gracious, the most merciful. O you who have believed, be persistently standing firm in justice, witnesses for Allah, even if it be against yourselves or parents and relatives. Whether one is rich or poor, Allah is more worthy of both. So follow not personal inclination, lest you not be just. And if you distort your testimony or refuse to give it, then indeed Allah is ever with what you do acquainted. Indeed Allah the Most High has spoken the truth.
Alright, so the MSU is holding a series of events solely for educational purposes, and its purpose is to fight for justice and freedom locally and globally around the world. So today's the second day of a week-long series of events called Anti-Oppression Week. Today's event is called Domino Effect Middle East Revolutions. From Tunisia to Egypt and Libya to Syria, the Middle East has witnessed a surge of revolutions with the start of a Tunisian man named Mohammed Abu Aziz, may Allah be merciful with his soul, sparked the beginning of the so-called Jasmine Revolution in Tunisia. This led to the start of many revolutions, which were the consequences of deception, lack of transparency, dictatorship in the Middle East, which were practiced under the Arab regimes. This wasn't a matter of whether it was going to happen, but rather a matter of when it was going to happen. We hope and pray that this is the beginning of a new dawn for the Muslim country, for the Arab and Muslim countries and the people of the Middle East. Today we have Professor O'Connell, who will give us his insight and analysis on this issue. Dr. O'Connell is a professor at UC Irvine in the Department of Sociology. After receiving his bachelor's from LMU, he received his master's and PhD in sociology at UCLA. Upon graduating UCLA and having taught there for 4 years, he was offered a job in UCLA. Upon graduating UCLA and having taught there for 4 years, he was then offered an administrative position at UCLA, declined, and came to UCI as it offers several courses he considers to be more interesting. O'Connell also has received numerous awards, including Outstanding Professor of the School of Social Sciences at UCI every year since 2000, and Outstanding Reader for Introductory Sociology, and Outstanding Undergraduate Teacher for the Department of Sociology. He has also published 2 course readers, including Reader for Introduction to Sociology, Reader for Race and Ethnicity, as well as essays including Notes on the Class Struggle and Predictions of the Iraq War. Without further ado, Professor O'Connor.
Tell me if I need the mic. If I don't need the mic, I probably won't use it. I want to thank the MSU for the invitation. I almost didn't accept the invitation because I just knew it would be a formidable task to, excuse me, coffee delivery. Thank you. It would be a formidable task to give a nice, scholarly, rigorous talk on these uprisings in North Africa and the Middle East. And I thought, well, I have time, I can pull it off. And then this weekend I cleaned up the study, and as far as I got was assembling articles that would provide the basis for a talk, which I haven't written out. Then I thought, you know, the best professor for this talk is Professor Mark Levine in history, but I don't know if he's returned from Egypt yet. So, and then I just can't bail out on the MSU, so here I am. So I thought my strategy would be to read through some things I've underlined, just kind of go through the newspaper reports. I was a bit hesitant also to give this talk because I figured, well, some of my students will be here and they can almost predict what I'm going to say, so why should, you know, they're going like, that's another lecture I've heard. But then some of you are new, so I'll give you my talk. First of all, let me run through some commentary and then talk about an analytic structure for understanding what's going on. So I'm going to have a 2-part talk. One is the subject at hand, which is a series of uprisings that are still ongoing throughout North Africa and the Middle East. The second part of my talk is not something that I was asked to speak on, but it is very relevant, and it is a topic that I discuss in my class on race, ethnicity, and nationality, and that's something called Islamophobia. And so I'm going to conclude with that, and then I guess we could do questions and answers, and we'll go from there. Okay, let me work backwards. I have a class at 7. I want to be walking out of here in 1 hour exactly, which means, you know, 2 or 3 minutes away. So, you know, if I'm not watching the clock, then somebody, I'll appoint you, Fernando, to watch the clock. Fernando's my TA, so he'll make sure I get to the class. Okay. So, every week I get in the mail a newspaper from Britain. It's called The Guardian Weekly. I've been getting it for years, and as my wife says, one issue of The Guardian Weekly is worth more than a month of the LA Times. And for The Guardian Weekly in February, February 25th of this year, they published, The Guardian Weekly, published an article entitled Arab Youth Anger in the Ascendancy, and talks about the young. And they have a sidebar over here. They have not passed it. They have a sidebar over here on page 29. And it's entitled Stagnant Nations Growing Problems. And it lists various countries. Let's go down the list. Morocco, under the leadership of King Mohammed VI, he's ruled for 11 years. Inflation is 2.5%. The gross domestic product is about $4,900. The youth unemployment rate is, for the year 2009, 21.9%. So They don't define youth. Oh, youth is defined as age 15 to 24. So 1 out of 5 young people are not finding work. In Tunisia, inflation's at 4.5%. GDP is at 9,500. Youth unemployment 27.3%. Egypt, inflation. Remember, inflation is the rise in prices of the cost of goods and services. Inflation 12.8%. Gross domestic product 6,200. Youth unemployment 21.7. Jordan, inflation 4.4. Youth unemployment 27%. Syria, inflation 5.9. Youth unemployment 16.5%. Libya, inflation 3%, youth unemployment 27.4%. Algeria, inflation 5%, youth unemployment 45.6%. Saudi Arabia, youth unemployment 16.3%. And Yemen, inflation is 12.2%, youth unemployment 18.7%. In another article in the Nation magazine, which is a magazine that's sometimes good, it used to be better. It's not a radical magazine. It's written by liberals who hope the Democratic Party will save them from Republicans. But every now and then they do contain good articles, such as this one by Michael Clare, who points out that when future historians attempt to trace the origins of the current turmoil in the Middle East, they will find that one of the earliest of the many explosions of rage occurred in Algeria and was triggered by the rising price of food. On January 5th, young protesters in Algiers, Oran, and other major cities blocked roads, attacked police stations, and burned stores in demonstrations against soaring food prices. Indeed, the cost of food has been a major theme of anti-government demonstrations in Jordan, Sudan, and Yemen. Families that were barely able to survive are plunged into crisis and penury with inflation. You know, if prices are going up and wages aren't going up, as you know, when you see gas going well over $4 for a gallon of gas. Let's see, what else do I have to turn to? Going over to Central Asia. This is for February 4th, 2011, under international news again from the Guardian Weekly. Africa-scale hunger in flood-hit Pakistan. You might recall a heavy flooding last year, last summer. They talk about Sindh province, where some villages are underwater 6 months after the floods. And almost a quarter of children under 5 are malnourished, while 6% are severely underfed. A recent nutrition survey in Pakistan, it says the most recent nutrition survey in Pakistan, which apparently was done according to the state in 2002, found a national malnutrition rate of 13.2%. Malnutrition rates of 23% in northern Sindh province and 21% in the southern part of the province are current. Sindh is Pakistan's 3rd largest province and has some of its deepest inequalities. With the flooding last August, 14 million people had to flee their homes. I might throw in here a statistic I saw some years ago regarding Pakistan's agricultural lands. The statistic was that 2% of the population owned 44% of the most fertile lands. It reminded me of Vietnam, where a small part of the population owned the bulk of the land. We call this inequality. A couple of other things for you.